All right, welcome to part two of the video lecture. Picking up with Duty and Roles of Young Women. I already went to pages 47, 48, where you see Charlotte fainting away because she can't possibly be seen to willingly go with Montraville. She would alienate the reader, who would have been a fairly conservative and sheltered young girl. So she faints rather than going willingly. One character we haven't brought up yet is Mrs. Beauchamp. And Mrs. Beauchamp is kind of this ideal foil, right? You got LaRue on the one hand, who's really kind of a naughty lady, to say the least. You got Charlotte in the middle, and you got who's easily swayed one way or the other. And you got Mrs. Beauchamp over here, and she is this ideal. I have the perfect marriage. This is what you should aspire to, etc. She, Mrs. Beauchamp, wants to reunite Charlotte with her parents towards the end of the novel, but it's too late. Of course, Charlotte's got to die. She's got to die. She got to die. Here's the question that I want to ask you as well. Aren't the Temples themselves at fault as well? I mean, they are full of sentiment and full of benevolence. Obviously, Mr. Temple was a wonderful man who did something wonderful for Lucy, his wife's father, getting him out of debtor's prison. But, there's something that could be said about their lack of prudence in raising their daughter. They entrusted her to a woman that they and by the way, the narrator says this, that they should have done a little bit more checking on Mrs. LaRue, or Ms. LaRue, who, by the way, goes on to marry this Colonel Creighton fellow. It's kind of this side story. It's not terribly interesting, but it's just designed to show you that Colonel Creighton is yet another foolish old doddering old guy. He doesn't realize that LaRue is going to bilk him for all of his money and then kind of turn her back on him. So the novel is just filled with lots of people who make bad decisions. And there's another one. But Beauchamp is supposed to be the ideal, and Colonel Creighton is kind of like an old fool, right? There's no fool like an old fool, etc. One of the things, though, that I want you to kind of focus on, forgive my lingering cold here, is a statement where she writes to, well, it's the portion of the novel where Charlotte writes to her mother and has to explain, okay? And there's a section here where if you read it too fast, you don't let it sink in, and you kind of fail to appreciate exactly what's being said. She goes on with it and says, "Oh, I'm terribly sorry, and I've done something terrible here, and I've broken your heart, and I've broken Daddy's heart, etc." There's a point on page 81 where she finally fesses up and says, "I have yet one more dreadful confession to make, more dreadful than the rest. Mother, my dear mother, do not let me quite break your heart when I tell you in a few months I shall bring into the world an innocent witness of my guilt. Oh, my bleeding heart, I shall bring a poor little helpless creature, heir to infamy and shame," right? I'm going to have a child, and I'm not married, and I've disappointed you and Daddy and all this kind of anyway. But just prior to that, on page 80 in my text, she says, "I scorned to claim from his humanity." She's talking about Montraville here. She says, "I scorned to claim from his humanity what I could not obtain from his love." What is that? A commitment, right? She said, I didn't appeal to his humanity to have him marry me. And that was because I couldn't get him to marry me because he loved me. He clearly didn't love me. So she made this choice to say, I'm going to stay with him because I can't get him to marry me because he loves me, because he doesn't love me, and I'm not going to appeal to his humanity and have him take pity on me and marry me out of pity. And she says, I was conscious, now this is important, I was conscious of having forfeited the only gem, G-E-M, the only gem, like a ruby or an emerald, pardon me, that could render me respectable in the eyes of the world. What is that only gem that she has forfeited? Well, it's her virginity. Now, no matter how you feel about situations like this and topics like this, some people find it embarrassing, some people are very open about it, but the one thing that most people don't think is that a young woman's only gem is her virginity. That is a statement that really should take you aback and make you think, my goodness. So these young girls from upper class families were like commodities in some ways. That this is the only thing of value that she has, and if she loses it, she's now worthless. She has no value whatsoever. I mean, I'll read it again. I was conscious of having forfeited the only gem that could render me respectable. I have no respectability apart from my virginity. Not what you do, not how you live your life, not the way you treat others, nothing like that. It's no. It's all about your virginity and only your virginity. And if you don't have that, no matter what you do, there is nothing you can do to make up for that. That is incredibly severe. Now, what I'm going to ask you to consider is this. Rosen frames it that way. Does Rosen believe that? Or does Rosen simply tell girls, look, this isn't what I like? I don't like to tell you this, but this isn't and I don't necessarily agree with this, but this is the way the world views it. So to what extent is Rosen telling these girls to do X because she agrees with X? Or to what extent is Rosen telling them to do X because that's what the world expects and you need to know what the world expects, and it may not be fair, but that's how you're going to be treated. So you better wise up. That's an interesting question. How pragmatic is Rosen in all of this? Is this pragmatic advice, or is this advice that she sympathizes with and agrees with? Very interesting question. The narrator. Let's get down to the narrator. There's a difference usually in most novels between a narrator and an author. Then a narrator can be a voice that's not necessarily the voice of the author. We won't get into all of that here. But this peculiarly direct, awkward, annoying, odd set of statements to the reader, or worse yet, to the reader's moms. We looked at a couple of those. Why did she feel compelled to do that? It's not something that most, novelists do. They don't have their narrator constantly preaching to the reader. And in this case, it's not just simply commentary. It's one thing for the narrator to sort of comment on a bad character or a good character or something like this, or try to pull at the heartstrings of a character. This is direct address, like, hey, reader, listen up, I'm talking to you. That's a really confrontational sort of approach, and you have to wonder, why did she choose to do that? Well, obviously, maybe she feels like she has to do that with the age of the readers, and then also trying to defuse the hostility. Remember when we talked about Anne Bradstreet, the need to use language to rhetorically defuse objections. That was something Bradstreet did, remember? And, you have something similar here with Rosen. She's using the narrator's voice to confront, to, in some cases, almost belligerently argue with the certain readers who might find it silly nonsense, or mothers or parents who think this is immoral or unnecessary. She's picking at them, which is kind of interesting. Why does she feel compelled to do that? That there's a dynamic in there that I think is kind of interesting. With all art, you should always ask, what did the artist have to gain by doing whatever they're doing? Okay? People don't do this. They go to a movie and they just kind of see the movie and they let the movie wash over them. We're going to be looking at novels that were made into films later in the semester. And, one of the hard parts is that you go to a movie and you love just getting taken away by the movie and kind of just losing yourself in it. And that's a lot of fun. But to analyze film, and that brings a whole level of understanding that you don't have just by being a passive observer of film. You have to ask the question, well, why did they do that? Why did they have this scene there? Why did they change this? Why did they make this decision about the camera angle or the pacing or the lighting or the costuming or any of those kinds of things? All those are decisions that you have to make. You don't always get that from a writer. But even within a novel itself and not a film, novelists have the choice, a million different choices to make about what to tell you or what not to tell you, what to have the character say or not to say. So you should be thinking, when you're analyzing literature or art or film or music or anything that has a creative aspect to it, what did the person who created this, what did the artist want to achieve? How did doing X help her achieve some goal or objective? So I think this is a good place to start. Let's start with that question of, why does she do these direct addresses to the reader? What does she get out of it? What does she potentially stand to lose by doing it, right? I mean, I'm not the kind of reader who likes to be talked to all the time, particularly if I'm not the kind of reader she's addressing here. Maybe I'm not got a problem with it. What is the opportunity that she's seizing here? What is the opportunity cost that she may be giving up in doing it. This book purports to be didactic. That means it emphasizes a moral lesson. It tries to teach a moral lesson. And we see that the focus is on the younger readers. But is it not also taking aim at parents? You can't believe that the primary audience is parents, but it's a definite secondary audience. And she talks to parents in here. She assumes that some parents will be reading this novel, right? Whether they are sneaking it or not, that's another story. But at the same time, she assumes that some moms, dads possibly could be reading this novel. She certainly is taking aim at those parents and is critical of some parents and is trying to teach some parents what to do and what not to do, maybe as well. So everybody's got their emphasis on the teenage girls that read this novel. Nobody's thinking about the fact that Rosen may very well have some very strong messages for parents here and assumes that some of them will read it as well. So for all of that, a key question really still remains for us, and that is, what are we supposed to make of this book? Is it progressive? Frank? Is it progressive in the sense that she's talking about stuff that girls weren't supposed to talk about? Is it progressive in the sense that she is trying to tell girls, now look, I didn't make the rules. These are the rules. You need to know what the rules are. And unfortunately, whether you like it or not, you got to play by them because the stakes are incredibly high. Your reputation goes and your whole future and your whole life go with it. And so wake up, girly, because these are serious high stakes that we're playing here. Is that what she's doing? It's frank. Is it empowering in the sense of saying, now look, you may think this novel is all about trying to warn you and teach you moral lessons, but it's also empowering you to realize, listen, your average 14, 15, 16-year-old girl may very well be very naive about these issues, and now you know. Okay? And it's not something to be hushed up and whispered about in back rooms. You need to talk to your daughters and let them know, this is what the expectations are. This is what the society is going to think of you when these kinds of things happen. Or, on the flip side of all that, it's progressive, it's frank, it's empowering. Maybe it's not. Maybe this novel deserves to be condemned, castigated, criticized, because it really is all about enforcing the conformity and traditional restrictive gender roles on girls. Is that what it's up to? That she just wants to sell novels by, enticing girls to read about stuff that they're not really supposed to be reading about. And all along, what she really wants to do is scare the hoo-ha out of them and say, you know what? You'll sacrifice your only gem, and if you do, your life is over and you're worth nothing after that. Which of these sides is she on? I think it's really interesting. Is this novel illuminating for the reader, revealing for the reader, educational for the reader, eye-opening for the reader, or is it repressive, restrictive? Listen here, sober up, kid. Life sucks and then you die. Is that what we're looking at? I don't know. And the lovely thing about this novel is it's so darn ambiguous in some ways. When it comes to the motive here that Rosen has, when it comes to the themes, there's some balance that deserves to be looked at, and there is some ambiguity that makes it interesting. At its heart, it's really hard for me to determine what is Rosen really wanting to achieve in this novel. Anyway, so, okay, I hope that'll be a great discussion question for you guys. I hope it is. This week's online quiz for the online class is 3 questions. 1, who does LaRue marry? That should be whom. Whom does LaRue marry? 2, what trick does Belcourt pull to try to get Charlotte for himself? He tries to get Charlotte for himself. He pulls a trick to try to do that. Okay, what was that? And then what eventually happens to Belcourt at the end of the novel? What becomes of him? Okay. Now I need your quiz to my Yahoo email by Tuesday at midnight, and I need your posts for the discussion posted by Tuesday at midnight as well. I kind of neglected to tell you that, but the discussion posts are always due when the quizzes are due, okay? So have at it. I'll have this posted up here for you with your discussion question, and look forward to seeing you next week in class.